Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's jump right into this, because today we're looking at what is absolutely, without a doubt, the world's most infamous diamond, the Koh-i-Noor. But look, this isn't just some dry history about a shiny rock. What we're actually tracking here is a thrilling, century-spanning adventure. I'm talking heists, massive wars, shifting empires, and just intense next-level paranoia. We're going to trace the epic path of this legendary gem, right from the mines of India all the way to the British crown, and uncover exactly why it remains one of the most fiercely contested objects on the planet today.
So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the birth of the mountain, then move on to the Sikh Empire's prize and its surrender to the crown. After that, we'll cover its voyage to the exhibition, recutting the famous stone, and finally wrap up with the modern ownership dispute.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Birth of the Mountain.
Now, the diamond's early history is kind of shrouded in myth, but its story really takes concrete shape in the hands of the mighty Mughal emperors of India. And listen to this quote, because it brilliantly illustrates the dark aura surrounding this stone right from the start. The early Mughal emperor Humayun famously declared, "It cannot be bought, it can only be taken by force or received as a favor." That rule right there, that essentially set the theme for the diamond's entire blood-soaked history. It was literally destined to be fought over.
And you see that play out in one of history's greatest, most cunning heists. Picture this, it's 1739, and the Persian conqueror Nader Shah has invaded India and looted the Mughal capital. But the ultimate prize, the diamond, is completely missing. Well, legend has it that a courtesan actually tipped off Nader Shah that the defeated Mughal emperor had the gem hidden away inside his turban. So what does Nader Shah do? During a peace ceremony, he insists they swap turbans as a token of friendship. I mean, the Mughal emperor is completely cornered. He couldn't refuse without sparking another war. So Nader Shah takes the turban, unspools it, finds this massive gem, and reportedly proclaims it Koh-i-Noor, which translates to the Mountain of Light.
That brings us to Section 2, the Sikh Empire's prize.
So, after bouncing around Afghan empires for a while, the diamond finds its way back to India in the early 19th century. Ranjit Singh, who was the formidable founder of the Sikh Empire, essentially extorted it from an overthrown Afghan ruler who was seeking refuge. Now, when Ranjit Singh asked the former owner's wife, Wafa Begum, what the stone was actually worth, she gave this incredible answer. She said, "If a strong man threw a stone in 4 cardinal directions and vertically, Koh-i-Noor would be worth more than the gold and precious stones filled in the space." That is just such a vivid image, right? It perfectly captures the almost mythological, entirely incalculable value they placed on this single rock.
And because of that immense value, Ranjit Singh grew incredibly paranoid about thieves. His security measures were literally straight out of a Hollywood heist movie. When the diamond wasn't on lockdown in the high-security Gobindgarh fort, it traveled in a heavily guarded camel convoy. But to confuse any would-be attackers, the convoy included 39 identical decoy camels. 39! The diamond was actually always hidden on the first camel immediately behind the guards, but the secrecy was absolute. Out of his entire empire, only his chief treasurer knew exactly which camel carried the Mountain of Light.
But as we know, an empire's stability rarely lasts. When Ranjit Singh died in 1839, it sparked a brutal and chaotic succession crisis. Over just a few years, rulers were overthrown, prime ministers were assassinated, and the diamond was frantically passed around as the ultimate political leverage. By 1843, the dust briefly settled, and a 5-year-old boy named Dalip Singh was installed as emperor, with this massive Koh-i-Noor actually fastened to his tiny arm in the court of Lahore.
Let's move to Section 3, Surrender to the Crown.
Now, the British East India Company was aggressively expanding its reach at this time, and they saw the Sikh Empire's internal chaos as the absolute perfect opportunity to strike. So, following the bloody Anglo-Sikh Wars, the British emerged victorious in 1849. They forced the now 11-year-old Maharaja Duleep Singh to sign the last Treaty of Lahore, and the British Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie, made sure a very specific clause was in that treaty. The Koh-i-Noor was not going to be framed as a gift. No, it was explicitly treated as a coveted spoil of war, officially and legally surrendered by the child king directly to Queen Victoria.
Which leads us to Section 4, Voyage to the Exhibition.
Okay, getting the world's most valuable diamond from India to London in 1850 was an absolute logistical nightmare, just filled with near disasters. The sheer absurdity of how close they came to losing it is staggering. Before it even left India, a British official named John Lawrence absent-mindedly left the priceless gem in his waistcoat pocket and sent it to the laundry. Seriously, the laundry. Thankfully, a valet found it and gave it back. Once it was finally locked inside multiple nested iron safes and loaded onto a ship called the HMS Media, the crew faced a deadly cholera outbreak. Locals in Mauritius actually threatened to blast the ship out of the water if it didn't leave their port, and shortly after that, they were battered by a severe 12-hour gale. But against all odds, the diamond survived the high seas.
All right, Section 5, Recutting the Famous Stone.
So the diamond finally arrives in London for this grand public reveal, but things did not go the way the British Crown planned. At the 1851 Great Exhibition, the British public was massively underwhelmed. You see, the original Mughal cut was asymmetrical and kind of dome-like. It didn't sparkle the way they expected. The press mockingly dubbed it the Mountain of Darkness, complaining it looked totally dull inside its gilded birdcage display. Well, Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, couldn't stand the embarrassment, so he made a dramatic decision. The historic stone had to be recut to match European taste for sparkle and brilliance. And to pull this off, it took 38 grueling days of continuous labor. Prince Albert brought in these highly renowned Dutch diamond artisans, who set up a custom-built steam-powered mill right smack in the middle of London, just to painstakingly grind down this ancient stone. But to get that sparkle, it came at a massive cost. Get this, an astounding 42% of the original diamond was completely obliterated during the cutting process. The Koh-i-Noor was reduced from 191 metric carats down to 105.6. So while it definitely emerged as this dazzling oval brilliant that they called full of life, a massive chunk of its physical history was literally reduced to dust on the factory floor just to make it shine.
And finally, Section 6, the Modern Ownership Dispute.
Today, the recut diamond sits proudly on public display in the Jewel House at the Tower of London, but its journey is far from over. Right now, it remains at the center of a very complex geopolitical battle. Let's look at the claims here impartially. India has demanded its return since gaining independence in 1947, arguing it was taken illegally. Pakistan also claims ownership, rejecting the British treaty entirely and pointing out that the diamond was taken from Lahore, which is in modern-day Pakistan. Meanwhile, Afghanistan argues that Ranjit Singh used torture to extract it from their ruler back in 1813, which would make the Sikh ownership illegitimate in the first place. And the United Kingdom? Well, they insist that the gem was obtained completely legally under the terms of the 1849 Treaty of Lahore, which was signed by the Maharaja. So we're really looking at 4 completely different, deeply held interpretations of history.
And because this dispute is so gridlocked, there have been some pretty fascinating compromises proposed over the years. One incredibly radical suggestion was to physically cut the diamond again into 4 equal pieces and distribute them to each claiming nation. Another idea was to build a special neutral museum right on the Wagah border between India and Pakistan just to house it. However, as you might guess, none of these have gained any real traction. For decades, the British government has maintained a very firm stance. The status of the Koh-i-Noor is simply non-negotiable, and it will be staying in the UK. Which leaves us with this final thought for today. When a single object has been stolen, extorted, conquered, and contracted across so many shifting empires over so many centuries, who does it actually belong to? Where exactly is the line between a historical spoil of war and cultural repatriation? As you think about all the blood, the crazy heists, and the treaties that trace the Koh-i-Noor's epic journey, ask yourself, what should its ultimate fate be? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.